Hello everyone, welcome again. Now let's move to theme 3. In this theme we are going to cover language variation regarding sociolinguistics. But before we talk about the content of this third theme, language variation, let's introduce what we mean by language variation. And before that, let's come back to sociolinguistics and say that sociolinguistics is the study of the relationship between, on one hand, language and on the other one, society. It tries to investigate the effect of language on society and the effect of society on language. Now, this is about what sociolinguistics is. Now, the main concerns of sociolinguistics, either whether it is micro-sociolinguistics or macro-sociolinguistics, the main concerns is to study language at different areas, generally 3 areas: language variation, language contact, and language change. Now, in this theme, let's introduce what is meant by language variation. The contents before that, let's tell you what are the points to present and discuss, of course, briefly in this theme 3, language variation. So we are going to see sociolinguistics and language variation, point 1. And the second point, we try to introduce the main manifestations of language variation. On this point, we can say that we have chosen some, let's say, manifestations: the dialect, the idiolect, the sociolect, register, and style. We have limited ourselves to these main manifestations. Now, what is meant by language variation? We can say that language variation is about sociolinguistics that involve the study of how language varies among different groups of speakers and the relationship of this variation to social factors. The study of the effects of social structure on language and the exploration of the speaker's linguistic diversity could help people know more about what was language to develop her personal, cultural, social identities. Of course, on the available literature, we can see that it has been always said that William Labov is the one who initiated language variation, is a language varianist through his famous study on this issue. Now, for Labov 2008, any investigation begins with the simple act of noticing a variation, that there were 2 alternative ways of saying the same thing. In addition to this, reference could be to Jinnah 28, 2018, who explicated the strong point that urged Labov to demonstrate that language use is highly structured and not random. On this point, we can say that language variation is concerned with the effect of language or the effect of social variables on language, and this leads to variations within language. It may vary from one speaker to another, a group of speakers, or even within the members of the same community. Language variation is concerned with the investigation of these sociolinguistic phenomena. Now, what are the main manifestations of, let's say, language variation? Generally, we have many examples. In this presentation about language variation, we have just to present 4 examples. By the way, they are not the only examples. There are many other examples, but these are the very common manifestations of language variation. Examples of these are, we will talk about the dialect, the idiolect, the register, the style, and also the sociolect. Let's begin with the first main manifestation, that is the dialect. So a dialect is a particular variety of language. It is the collection of attributes, either phonetic, phonological, syntactic, morphological, or all of them, that make one group of speakers noticeably different from another group of speakers of the same language. This is about what a dialect is. This is a summary of the definition of a dialect from the available literature on this concept. But very simply, we can say that when we talk about a dialect, we talk about one aspect of language variation among a speaker or among many, a group of speakers within the community. What is noticeable about language variation? It could be at different levels, phonetic or phonological levels, the syntactic levels, or morphological levels, or all of them. That's why when we talk about a dialect, we have many types of dialects. We have, for example, the very common one, the geographical, let's say, the dialect. The geographical dialect, that type of language variation that is related to a given language and that makes a given geographical location differs from another geographical location, although they speak the same language. For example, in Algeria, we talk about the use of Algerian Arabic language or Arabic language, but we may notice, for example, that people in the east of Algeria, they may have a given specific use of language, Algerian Arabic, that may differ from that of the west of Algeria, in terms of intonation, in terms of, let's say, vocabulary, in terms of even sometimes some morphological concerns and considerations. There is also another type of dialect, which is the minority dialect. The minority dialect. That means within a heterogeneous community or country, for example, where we find a country where there are different minorities, or one minority, we may notice that this minority speaks that the language of this community or the country, but it has significant variations and differences from the other communities and groups of speakers. We have also religious dialect. For example, I usually give I think the best example to give is in Lebanon. For example, in Lebanon we may find different religious groups and sects. For example, we find the Muslims. Within the Muslims, we have the Shiites, we have the Sunni, and we have the Christians. We may easily, all of them, they speak the Arabic Lebanese language, the Arabic Lebanese, the dialect of Arabic language within Lebanon. We may distinguish differences among the speakers, the speakers of the Arabic Lebanese regarding their religious background. We can, for example, notice that easily, but we have to be very, let's say, careful, because it's not easy sometimes to find the differences and the distinctions. Overall, what can we say here? We can say that the dialect or a dialect is a particular variety of language. It's the most, let's say, a common example and manifestation of language variation. Now, let's move to the second example. It has to do with the idiolect. What is the idiolect? It is a variety of a language unique to an individual. That is, it's very let's say obvious here. that every individual has an idiolect. That means every one of us has his own special language variation. Within the same family, we speak the same language, but every one of us has his or her own language variation. This is, of course, commonly known as the idiolect. Of course, within a group of people that belong to the same society, they do have also specific differences regarding other groups of people. Here we talk about a sociolect. Now, a sociolect is a variety of language characteristic of a social background or a status. So the element to consider here is the social background or status. An example of a sociolect is standard Italian, which is a dialect spoken by, in particular, to Tuscany. So this is the sociolect. Now, let's talk about a register, another manifestation of language variation. What is a register? So a register is mainly characterized by vocabulary differences, either by the use of a particular words or by the use of words in a particular kind of language produced by the social situation. Talking about register, exactly, we are concerned with vocabulary differences that may make a difference between one person or a group of people or group of speakers, and they use this special vocabulary. And the other example or manifestation of language variation is language style or a style. So it is generally style is about the range of variation which is within the speech, which makes a difference between generally formal and informal language, between formal and informal language. So one person may use a very formal language, and another one may use an informal, or the same person may refer to the formal language and also in a special context, in a special setting. And at the same time, the same person may use informal language because he or she is within a different setting that is an informal setting. This has to do with formality and informality, and formality and informality is another manifestation of language variation. Overall, in this theme, let's say theme 3, we have tried to explain what we mean by language variation and to provide some examples of language variation. We talked about the dialect, the idiolect, the sociolect, the register, and the style. This is all about theme 3, language variation. Thank you very much indeed.